Okay, in the previous video, what we did is we actually set up an FTP server and a web server that's running on our Server 2003 machine. Now what I'm going to do is I want to set up an FTP client to connect up to that server, and I want to be able to upload a file and see the file. And then what I want to do is I want to use a packet sniffer and analyze the traffic that's going to the server. So I'm going to start up my Windows 7 machine. And what I'm going to do to start with is I'm going to use some software that's popular for web development. If I go to my CD and I go down to connect to an ISO image on a data store, there's a CD called FTP software. So in this FTP software CD, we're going to have FileZilla. And that's going to be the tool that I'm going to use to connect up to the server. So I'm going to just double click on the FileZilla setup. So I'm just going to agree to the terms, and I'm going to allow anyone to run it on the computer. I'm going to leave all the defaults. I'm going to use the default location, and I'm just going to click the install button. And I'm going to hit finish. It's going to check for an update, and there is an update. You can update if you want. I'm going to just close this down because I don't need to update. So what I want to do is I want to start by just connecting up to the server. And my server IP address was 10.7.66. And I'm pretty sure it was 32. So a couple things that you need to note is that if the server 2003 is powered down, at that point you will not be able to connect to it. So it definitely needs to be up and running. The other thing is the IP addresses can change often. So they can actually change even after a reboot. Now that can get kind of annoying. Normally it'll last for a while, like a day, but after it's powered down for a certain period of time, someone else could get that IP address. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over to my summary tab, and I'm just going to verify my IP address, and it isn't there. So I'm going to open my console. And it's 10.7.66.35. So that's the IP address of my server 2003. Okay, so the user we created was web dev. Now the username's not case sensitive. The password is, but the username's not. I use Tor, T-O-O-R, and then the port for FTP is port 21. Now FTP ports are optional, kind of like websites. Websites run on port 80. Normally you don't type in the address :80, but you could. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Quick Connect, and I see that I successfully got a directory listing. That's awesome. So we successfully connected up to our server. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to minimize this. I'm going to go off script here for a minute, and I'm just going to quickly create a web page and upload that to the server. So if you don't want to, that's okay, it's not required, but I'm going to do it just so that way you can see how this works. So a web page is nothing more than a text file with special tags. So I'm just going to create a blank text file on my desktop. I'm going to right click on my desktop, and I'm going to go new, and then I'm going to go text document, and I'm going to call it default. So I've got a default text document. I'm just going to open this up, and I'm going to create an HTML document. So HTML is made up of tags. A tag is nothing more than a less than and then a word. In this case it's HTML, and then a greater than. So that's what's considered to be an opening tag, meaning that as soon as a web browser receives this, it's going to say, oh, okay, at this point I need to start reading this as HTML. And then we're going to have a closing HTML, which is the same as the opening, except for it's going to be a less than and then a backslash, and then, or a forward slash, and then a HTML, and then a greater than. So this is an HTML document at this point. So anything I place inside this document will be considered to be an HTML, something that the web browser will read. So we have two different sections in an HTML document. We've got a head, and a head section handles things like attributes of the window. So for example, it'll have a title. Like here, this isn't a web browser, it's Notepad, but in here, this has got a title. It's not part of the actual document, but the document definitely set the word up here. So our head section handles the title. So there's a tag called a title, and I'm just going to call it my website. And then I'm going to close that title tag. So I'm just going to space this in a little bit so that way hopefully you can kind of see how that looks. So the head section sets the title, and then there's also something called the body. So I'm just going to create a body tag, and then I'm going to close that body tag. And the body tag is basically everything from here down. So that would be like the content that you're reading on the web page. So that's going to be the body. So we're going to specify the body. And there's something called an H1 tag. The H1 is big and bold, and I'm just going to say hello world. Oops, I got to close that with a forward slash. So if you want, you can pause the video and copy exactly what I've got here if you weren't able to keep up with me. But we've got a head section that's got a title. We've got a body section that only has something in there that's going to be big and bold, and it's just going to say hello world. Kind of cheesy, but that's normally people's first documents. So I'm just going to save this. I'm just going to go File, Save. And I want to just upload this, so I'm going to save it to my desktop. And then I'm going to close it. So I need to scroll back down and get to FileZilla. So the way FileZilla is broken down is there's two different groupings. We've got a remote area, and then we've got a local area. So the right side is going to be the web server, and the left side is going to be our local computer. So we could browse like through our C drive. If I click on desktop here, I see my default .txt. Now after so many seconds, it automatically closes the connection. Not a big deal. We can either reconnect, or we could have just dragged it and it would have reconnected for us. It's pretty forgiving. So this default .txt. So the first thing I want to do is I just want to rename it. So I clicked on it slowly. Otherwise, you can right-click on it and do a rename. And I'm just going to rename it to .htm. So that's the default web extension. So even though it's just a text file, we put an HTML on it, and then I dragged it from here to there. And now what happened is this document is currently located inside the www root folder on our eServer 2003. So we were able to access our eServer 2003 and put this document in the www root folder. So what that means is now if we come down to our Internet Explorer, and if I open the Internet Explorer up, and what I want to do is I want to just type in 10.7.66.35 and hit enter. So this is our document. So we put this up onto our server. So we created our first web page. So now our tab says my website, so that's our title. And then the body of it is from here down, says hello world. So that's our H1. So you can feel free to kind of play around with this. I just wanted to show this is what a web developer would do. They would spend their time building the content. When they're done, they would upload it to the remote server. So if it was GoDaddy or HostGuru or wherever it's being hosted, they would probably use FTP to get their files to that location. You can upload images or whatever. So at this point, I think everything is working great. So what I want to do is I'm just going to close down my web browser, and I want to grab a screenshot of this. So that way I can at least see I was able to successfully connect up to the web server. So I'm going to open up Word. And I want to grab a screenshot of this. So I always go up towards the top where it says like Windows 7 or whatever. I just move the window. If I can drag that window, I know my focus is not inside of it, it's outside of it. And then I can do the print screen. So I'm just going to hit my print screen button. I do Alt print screen. You may have to do like Function Alt print screen. And then if you come over inside the Word document or the WordPad document, you just need to paste that in there. Okay, so that's my first screenshot. We need 2 screenshots. So I'm just going to minimize this. And I'm actually going to minimize my FTP server. It's actually my FTP client. Just going to delete this off my desktop. We don't need that anymore. So now what I want to do is I want to do the second part of this. And what the second part of this is installing Wireshark. Wireshark is a packet sniffer that allows us to analyze traffic at a deeper level than what most people do. Most people just know data is being passed around and they don't even know what that data looks like. We're going to use a tool to analyze what data is being passed from the client to the server. It's a very common tool that's used by both hackers and by developers. So I'm just going to click on the Start button and go to My Computer. And then I still have the DVD in, the Tools DVD. So on here we've got Wireshark. So Wireshark is going to be the tool that we're going to use. So I'm just going to open up Wireshark, and I'm just going to do the installation. So I'm just going to say Next. I'm going to agree to their terms. I'm going to take all of the plugins that they've got and all the settings. I'm going to leave everything default here. I'm just going to go Next. I'm going to use the default location, the destination. I'm going to say Next. Okay, so there's a checkbox saying Install WinPCAP. I'm going to install that. So I'm going to click on the Install. And now it's going to go through the WinPCAP installation. I'm going to agree to everything. I'm going to automatically start the WinPCAP driver. So I'm really just taking the defaults. I'm not, varying too much from what the defaults are. So I'm going to start Wireshark. So I'm just going to start Wireshark. If you didn't do that, or if you don't do that, Wireshark, if I click on my Start button here, I can just click in the search box Wire. And then you can see that it's a little blue icon with like a shark fin on it, and that's Wireshark. So I'm just going to start up Wireshark. So when I'm running Wireshark, the very first thing I need to do is select my network card. So your network cards will be listed in this box here. I'm just going to click on my network card and I'm going to click on the Start button. So what this is doing is it's actually starting up Wireshark. You'll see a whole bunch of different traffic. Depending on the time of day or what network you're on, this traffic will vary. So quite a bit of traffic that's moving. What I like to do is I like to use filters just because there's so much UDP and TCP and ARP and ICMP. So to just kind of get some of this traffic down, the only thing I care about is really just FTP. So I could filter just by FTP and hit enter, and it will only watch for FTP traffic. The other way I could do it, and this is the way I most commonly do it, is I will do TCP dot port equals 21, and then I hit enter. So either way will work. The reason that I do this is because sometimes I'll be monitoring multiple ports. So maybe I'll do port 21, I'll do port 25, I'll do port 23. So if I wanted to, I could just do like a space, and then it's called a pipe. It's shift and then the key right above your enter key. You could do a pipe space, and then do like a TCP dot port equals 23. So, and you could pipe as many ports as you wanted. So that's the way I normally do it. For this specific lab, we only need to have the TCP port 21 or FTP, either one. So right now we're not seeing anything. Now it's continually sniffing and grabbing packets in the background. We're just not seeing any of the packets that's not adhering to our current filter. So, okay. So what I want to do is I'm going to come back over to my client. Now it timed out, which I would have expected. So I'm going to reconnect here. I'm just going to click on this quick connect again, and I'm going to establish a new connection. I'm just going to say OK. And it connected. I can see everything there. If I minimize this, I can see that my Wireshark is noticing that it is doing its connection. So we were able to steal all the packets. So if I analyze it, the way that the three-way handshake works is we send a SYN packet to the server kicks back a SYN ACK, and then we follow up with an ACK, an acknowledgement. So basically we're saying, hey, we want to talk to you. It responds back saying, okay, I'm here. And then we follow back with, okay, let's start talking. So it's going to then respond saying, hey, I'm a Microsoft SQL Server. And it's going to say, I need a username. We're passing web dev over to it. And then it's going to say, I need a password now. And the password's getting passed over as Tor. And then it's doing a login, and then it's doing a directory listing. So this is the traffic. The thing that's most concerning here is you can actually see the username and the password being done in clear text. So if we were on a network where multiple people were connected up to that network, and they were connecting up to their web server, there's a high probability that their credentials could get stolen. So it's something to really think about. So in this case, this is going to be another screenshot that you're going to grab. So I'm going to click on this Windows 7 and just kind of move this window around so I can see it. And then I'm going to do my Alt screen print. I'm going to go into my Word document. I'm going to go below this document, or the screenshot, and I'm going to paste this one in there. So I've got both screenshots that I need to submit. So at the bottom of the document, you need to write up a short paragraph. And what I'm looking for in the paragraph is basically I'm saying at the bottom of the paragraph, write a short paragraph describing the dangers of unsecure protocols. All right, well, that's pretty obvious. I mean, there's quite a few unsecure protocols, and the dangers are your credentials can get stolen. What are some options that you could do to prevent someone from accessing your system? So what you really need to do is try to figure out how can I get around unsecure protocols. Now, for FTP, the easy answer would be don't use it. Unfortunately, sometimes that's not an option. I've worked with places that it is required that you have to FTP. So if I needed to FTP in, I would need to do a couple of different options. I mean, I could VPN in, I could SSH in, which actually is going to be our next lab. We're going to cover that. Otherwise, I could encrypt the data and send the data over an unsecure channel. So if somebody did hack it, they would be able to steal my encrypted data. So there's really two different approaches that could be used. But really the best approach would be, let's just not use this protocol and let's find a different way of transferring the files, either through like a network share or web dev. There's a lot of different options. So anyways, that's really what I'm looking for, is somehow just a little bit of an explanation of some things that you can do. So hopefully this video helps, and I'll see you in the next video.